Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you with another great guest today that I had to reschedule with, but is now back here with us. And before we do that, as usual, I do want to thank my sponsors for this month, Damian and Bailey from Higher Elevation. I got a banner running across the bottom there, higherelevationvt.com, 65 Northgate Plaza, Suite 6, Morrisville, Vermont, 802-200-2937. Go check out the shop. They got a beautiful store here, lovely glass collection, and have cultivators on their shelves that have also appeared on my show here too. So great people that I really think are doing business the right way here in Vermont. And I do want to just send a couple shout outs to my last couple guests, Joseph Calderon from Grateful Valley Farm in New York, in the Cannabis Farmers Alliance, Chris Ferrone from the Talking Joints Memo, Paula Collins from the Law Office of Paula Collins, Summer Westerber from the Kairos Insurance Group, Mark Chaldone from Better Chem Consulting. And we've got a number of great guests also coming up here, including Saturday, I'm going to have Rob Sguerra back on the show. He just dropped a new album here in Vermont. Sunday, I'm going to have Larissa Bolivar on again. And if you haven't watched our first two interviews, I suggest you do so. And then Tuesday, the 23rd, I'm going to have Box Guts on here, local MC. And then I've got on Thursday, I got a double dipper with Nadi Renmis and Stephen Houghton, who's another New York cultivator. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. And I want to thank everybody also who's donated to the fundraiser and everybody who's been helping me, try to bring this dream to fruition here. And tonight, I'm not going to waste any more time tonight. I've got a great guest, and we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is making hash. And if you guys have listened to any of my shows and the stories about my dad, you'll understand why this is near and dear to my heart. And my guest tonight, it's hard to see that on there. The company is Sambo Creeck Filtration, and my guest is Charles MacGowan. Charles, thank you for being here tonight, man.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. And I'm going to put you in the big box, and I'm going to solo you. Solo on you for a minute. I was hoping before we do anything super serious, maybe you would give us a 5-minute life story.
Right on. I've lived in many places, so I don't have one particular place where I call home, but I've lived in Central America. I lived in the Amazon River for a bit, actually, so I bounced around for a lot of places, what to call it, here in the States, and for the most part, I've always been involved in, like, finance. I did a lot of commodities work, including physical gold and things of that nature, and, at some point in time, my attorney was, the odds of you going to prison for doing stuff with gold is a lot higher than going into drugs. So why don't you just, head on over that way? And so I ended up in cannabis for one reason or another. And it's been a wild ride since then.
And I want to ask you a little bit about that, because we talked about this on the phone, and the gold mining stuff to me sounded fascinating. And we're going to get into the weed stuff for sure, but I'd really love to hear about your experience working with gold mines.
If you go back a few years, there was an episode of South Park where Cartman is doing the whole cash for gold type of thing. That is exactly where I got it from, and that is exactly what I did. When that was happening, that is why I did it and exactly how I did it. And so I was in Latin America with Western Union, MoneyGram, and a few money remittance companies, and it was like an add-on, and it just exploded in my face like you have no idea. And so we went from buying gold, not in a pawn shop, but like from pawn shops and from people. And then we scaled all the way up. I got a master's degree, or the equivalent of a master's degree, in diamond grading. I got into watches and all kinds of crazy things. I learned chemistry and how to refine gold, and I got to a very high level on all of those trades. And we had operations in many countries, and the scale of the operation really was epic. But Like all good things, the whole gold thing, as it meteorically rise, it also did come down pretty fast as well. And so for us, for me, it was a natural pivot to something different. And by all means, working with gold and mining and dangerous chemicals in Latin America, precursors, some of them, is not a walk in the park. It's extremely dangerous. So, I think things happen for a reason. And I saw the writing on the wall and I just kept walking.
Mm. Yeah, it does seem like the mining industry is pretty brutal from what I've read about it.
Yeah, worked with cyanide. We did like the Alaska guys where they're like panning for gold in the river. All of that, from the rural artisanal mining to the large industrial mining, in helicopters picking up gold in the middle of the jungle from large mines. All of that, I did all of that.
Mm.
Very interesting stuff.
And it sounded like I want to dial this back a little, but it sounded like you got a bachelor's in business in college, international economics, or something like that.
Yeah, I studied international business. I got a minors in finance. I got a minors in economics, and then a ton of other certifications like diamonds and all this kind of stuff. As I went along, I just like to learn. But the biggest education I've had is just through hard work, um, and just engaging in life with very smart people and consultants that showed me a few trades. So taught myself through YouTube a lot. So it's definitely been epic. All of it is been a great experience, but I've learned a lot and I do know a lot of things, a lot of trades.
Charles McGowan, Sambo Creek Filtration. I'm so glad we finally got to do this, man. Thank you for being patient with me, by the way, while I work out the kinks with my production here. Um, so let's talk about your transition here, because the mining industry obviously much different than the cannabis industry, but the person who connected us is a guy named Justin Massey here in Vermont, who I believe is running some of your gear. And he was the one who told us we should talk. And I actually found this to be a super fascinating topic. I don't know a lot about it. And that's why I get guys like you, Charles. So, yeah, maybe you could tell us how you transitioned to Sambo Creek, how you started the company, and then we'll get into your product line and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, from my mining days, we worked with an Italian company, and they're like the world's foremost manufacturer and supplier of gold refining equipment. And at this point, they're very close personal friends. Great crew in Italy, really good people. And so I think the first foray for me, just trying to find out our place in cannabis in general. My wife, who she's actually my boss, she's the owner. So she's like, in the gold rush, it was Levi Strauss that made all the money. It's not all the miners. It's the guy selling the pickaxes. So like, figure out what the pickaxes are and where the money's at, because we tried to do a grow and the licensing and everything. And if you were going to do it right, for the most part, it was a ton of money to do it right and many years to just even get a license. Things have changed now, but this was a minute ago. So I kind of I saw this little Buchner funnel that they were using, a company out in California that was making these little Buchner funnels, and they were a bucket of money. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand how the solution was to have, you know, dozens of these little Buchner funnels to do filtration. And so the devices that I've worked with before in mining in general, lots of different filtration devices, and one of them in particular that I've worked with, I just thought it'd be a good idea. So I reached out to the guys in Italy. I'm like, hey, is there an opening for us here in this space? And they're like, cannabis, it's extremely illegal here. We want nothing to do with it. But if you want to go for it, you have our blessing. We have your back. And so it kind of started with that. And then just a big shout out there for Future 4200. We actually had our first real demo with him. And man, from there, I just couldn't stock those things. We brought a few in, did a demo, and then we just sold so many of these filters. And from there, it just kinda grew organically, right? I mean, how people were looking for different solutions and how I could fit into that market, and the advantage is that we're a small company, but we've got some incredibly smart people behind us, right? So I'm fortunate that we have the resources to get whatever we need done. I've got extremely smart people, extremely amazing manufacturing behind me. And so I just bridge the gap, right, between what people want, what people need, and we make it happen. It's always a challenge because you don't just because it's you have an idea doesn't mean that idea is gonna pan out or it's actually gonna work well or not. Definitely not everything works out well, but for sure man, I think we've achieved some very significant achievements just working in that model where I just focus on talking to the customer and then just getting into labs and try to understand what's going on. And in that process, this guy reached out to me over a pump, and I saw some things, and we actually got talking about this static process. And he 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 wasn't a huge fan, extremely smart guy, very knowledgeable. He wasn't a fan of the technology, and he pointed me over to another guy who I went to see in Oklahoma because, man, it was just so, you know what I mean? It's like one of those aha moments where you see something and you know there's a there. What that is or how that's gonna work out, who knows? This was years ago, and so I went out to Oklahoma. I actually filmed a video with him. I have that up on YouTube, and from there, I just had this itch, right? You know, in my quest for product development, how that kinda worked out. And then I continued the actual research with the guy that I initially learned it from, which is our mutual friend, Justin Massey. So that's kinda how this all came to be because I started talking to Justin about pumps and about a whole bunch of other things, and he's always been super amazing with me and helped me provide his space so I could do R&D on my equipment and just get some validation from a person that he's extremely anal retentive in a good way, and it's just his attention to detail is real amazing, and I think he's got to be the cleanest lab guy I've ever met, and so I really value those qualities of him, and so through the years, you know, we've shared a lot. I've gotten a lot of feedback from him and shared a lot of ideas on what to do, and led me to the latest thing that we came up with the plasma static, which is a trichome separator. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, and this is in my notes here, which I also have read about on some of your social media and your website. I believe in my note says electrostatic trichome separation. But that's my only note. I'd really love to hear about that because that was fascinating to me when you brought it up.
Yeah, I myself, I think it really is fascinating. Something so simple yet, you know, there's all kinds of chemistry and electrical properties going on behind the scenes. Um, and the more I learned about it, you know, they've actually been doing this for a minute. Like this is not novel in any way or new in any way. The actual mechanics of the process, like there's people out there that have known for I don't know how long that the particles behave a certain way for a certain reason, right? You can statically charge trichomes and they'll behave a certain way. And I bumped into some of these videos. I guess they're called Maja plates or something like that. And so in like places like in Pakistan, they'll take these plates and they will rub particles. And so the particles, when they're being rubbed, they triboelectrically charge. Then the plates are touching your hand and your body as a ground. And so these charged particles, you know, opposites attract and all that kind of stuff. So the particles stick on the ground, which is these Maja plates. I'm butchering that name. I don't speak the language, but that's the whole point. And so the more I learned about it, I just thought it was fascinating, right? How this is a known, but the real problem is the process itself, where Justin, for one, didn't like the process because him being a very I'll say clean freak, and I mean that in a good way. It's a very messy process and it's very labor intensive. So him from an operator's perspective, there's just no way you could really economically scale this up. And I get that and I saw that. I did a lot of tours with people just seeing how they sifted and how they aesthetically charged using silkscreen printing mesh, and they'll have a nitrile glove, and through that process of friction they tribal charge those particles and then get them to separate. So um but yeah, but I knew there was a there, right? I just really took me a while to really understand how best to find how to industrialize that. And you know, it's very interesting how things came together because from the mining industry, we do this. Like this static stuff in mining is done all day, every day. You know, one of actually here in Florida, the premier world leader, it's a Finnish company called Wototech, and they've sold actually this division. But the guy that manufacturers for Wototech, they're here in Florida, right? And they make these machines for mining that statically separate one mineral from the other at enormous scales.
Huh.
So I just thought it was very interesting how like I'm going down this rabbit hole, and it ties back into what I know, what I've done before, um, and it's all really here. And so many people, no, you're crazy. This is not. There's nothing there. Like nobody's interested in this. Nobody wants this. But oddly enough, you know that video that I filmed in Oklahoma with a guy called Steve, um, the number of views that I was getting on that video just really got me to believe otherwise. If there's no there, if this isn't of interest to anybody, why are so many people watching this? So there's like a real cult following on the technique because it's extremely effective. What it is labor intensive. And so eventually, I really, through the counsel and the advice, the help of really smart people, man, we came up with something very interesting. And it's just a technology that doesn't there's no chemistry involved, right? You're just basically plucking heads out of hash. It's awesome.
Hmm. Charles MacGowan, Sambo Creek Filtration. I think I spelled your name wrong on the YouTube entry, and I'm going to fix that after this. I forgot the A, but I am going to fix that. Um,
That's a Scotch thing, man.
yep. Okay. So I'm curious because I've talked to a number of different manufacturers, right? People that are doing BHO extractions, people that are doing CO2 hype supercritical, people that are using propane. But the solvent list to me seems super fascinating because it doesn't require any, compressed gases or anything like that. Basically, you're just using water to agitate the plants, right?
Yeah, I think the significance of the solventless space in general, for me, it was the first time I just even smelled rosin. I vaped or whatever, all that kind of stuff, and it was first time I vaped. It was very interesting, right? I mean, it's like big slap in the face. It's very strong. Um, but it's not the same as smoking or things like that. It was just a very different sensation, a very different feel. But the first time I actually smelled, it was probably fresh press or something like that. But the first time it was cold cure. The first time I smelled a cold cure, the smell, just the aroma, it was so elegant. It was so nuanced, like nothing I had experienced before. And again, that's an easy realization for any consumer where I'm used to this, and here comes this thing, and you're like, "What is this?" This is You don't know what it is, but there's something so special about it. It comes through the nose, and then of course the highs are same, but so nuanced, so very different, right? It really is a good experience. So when you compare it to other products, to each his own, but this is a very easy sell. And then because there's so many concerns, at least in some crowds, of the effects of chemicals in the body, and I totally dig that. It's again a very easy sell, having a product that is in itself so aromatic, so flavorful, it almost feels like some very expensive caviar or like a truffle or like you know what I mean? It's not a very difficult product to differentiate, to understand as a consumer that it's exceptional, that there's something special there, but you have that added benefit that there is no chemicals involved, right? I mean, with the right process, there really isn't anything extra added to the plant, so you have that in its purest form without even having to think about what other chemicals may be involved or not. I mean, there's some great processors out there that'll do butane extractions and they purge all that butane out. But then there's some irresponsible, extractors that their stuff isn't so clean. Moreover, when you really dive into it, I think the solvent space is singular because you can't fix it. There's no fixing it. You have to grow it right, you have to harvest it right, you have to process it right, you have to do everything right to have a winning product. There's no fixing it, there's no modifying it, there's no you know what I mean? It's just like getting every part of the process right, and so you get that ultimate expression of your work. So if you did things half-assed, your product is gonna be half-assed and your product's just not gonna do well, right? And I think that just builds on the appeal of that product. It's awesome.
Mm, well said. I'd also like to just I'm gonna do a quick screen share if that's okay. Um, SamboCreek.com, Creeck. You can find all their stuff here, and I'm gonna hopefully quiz Charles about some of this right now, uh, including membrane filtration, filter trolleys, and AODD pumps, which to me means nothing right now. But I'd love to learn about that from you, and I'd love to have you maybe walk us through your website and your product selection.
Right. So we're primarily focused on filtration related apparatuses because that's where we started. We started with the filter trolleys, and it's a buchner funnel, right? I mean, it's as simple as it gets. However, they're just large Buchners, and they have integrated systems where it's all in one place, and it has hundreds of applications, right? I mean, I think there's a we have a video where one of the guys from Tesla, the Redwood Minerals, something like that, they do lithium, some sort of lithium salt filtration on them. So I mean, it goes a long way for all kinds of stuff. So those are the kind of products that we started off with, and there we've uh, moved on to other things like lenticular filtration. We make pumps. You know, there's a I know just the pumps here that we looked at were so expensive, and we sell so many pumps because of the trolleys. We have a lot of trolleys everywhere. But I saw two things in pumps. Everybody's filtering extremely cold, right? And these AODD pumps are super simple. They're great, but if you run them in cryo temperatures, they stall on you. So we made a special cryo temperature pump. I mean, we sell them in Siberia. You'll find our pumps all over Siberia. It's incredible how much how well they do in extreme
All right.
temperatures. So then
Why did these other pumps, sorry to cut you off, but why do these other pumps fail in cold temperatures? Why is that, Charles?
because these things work off of air, and so these pumps have little holes inside the actual pump that cycles two pistons. So it's got a rod, and this rod goes back and forth like that, cycling a piston. But that's powered by air, and so everything inside is frozen, right, at maybe minus 86 C or something like that. And so when you have compressed air going in there that has water vapor in them, the water turns it into ice. And all these holes, they keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where nothing happens because the air can't get out. So number one, of course, you need to have dry compressed air, but also you need to have a pump with those cavities designed for a certain way for air to freely circulate in the presence of extremely cold temperatures.
Oh, hmm.
Yeah. And then we did one for hash. Like if you look at hash, my gosh, I've got a great video on this. Like, I met this guy in New York, and he's making a centrifugal pump, and most of the major manufacturers are using this pump for pumping hash. So we made a pump. I sent it over to Justin, and I got the other guy to send me his pump. And I'm like, okay, this is like the tried and true pump, the centrifugal pump that all the big boys are using. Why don't we give them a spin? Let's see how it goes, right? The guys in Italy did a phenomenal job, like just designing what a diaphragm pump should look like for hash, and that means just the tolerances and the shear inside the pump to be just like on point. So like we don't crush things, we don't destroy things. Like diaphragm pumps, they have a diaphragm and it slams against the wall. So you can imagine, right? Your trichomes in between that space, they're just gonna, destroy. So we took care of all those things. And the other pump, man, it's like a quarter of the hash just disappeared. Like it just vanished. It just got melted away. It just grounded up.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge realization for us. And just our stuff just, I think we lost more hash just in the cavities of the pump because the pumps are big than, what the losses were themselves. From like 500 grams, I think we lost like a gram versus like 100 and something on the other pump. So it was insane. So for me, it was a real huge realization of really what was going on. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things, kind of like people make a lot of claims, right? And us as me as a consumer, I'll assume that because it's a big name, the big boys, I would think that they've done their research, right? And their stuff is on point. And it was a shock to me that no, they didn't do their research. They just assumed or made assumptions, or I don't know what happened, but there was no there. So that was really interesting.
Hmm. And one of the other things that I talked to Justin about, and I believe I spoke to you about, is sort of the shape of these vessels for washing hash, which was
Mm,
fascinating to me because it sounded like, there's round vessels and there are rectangular or square vessels, and maybe that somehow affects the dynamics of the water, the vortex or whatever. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on
yeah.
that. That was something I had never heard about and really piqued my interest when I did hear about it.
Yeah, so this for me also was up in my wheelhouse, right? And so we're talking specifically about making cold water extracts, bubble hash, whatever you want to call it. And so the question is, what is the best method of liberating those particles without damaging them, and what is the relationship of the vessel geometric shape versus the extraction efficiency, yield, quality, etc. Right? And so what I learned out of this whole exercise, we have some fantastic engineers, but in this case was not a benefit because we are not trying to make a fantastic agitation device. So I'll give you an analogy. In mining, I used to have a 5,000 gallon, many 5,000 gallon tanks, and they were round. And what we were trying to do is to get sand from the gold mining process to be in suspension, because if you had sand that settled on the bottom, that sand would not react with the sodium cyanide that we were using. We were using cyanide to extract gold. So you
Huh.
needed to have particles under suspension. And so all of the engineers, they're fantastic at doing that. Of course, there's, industrial mixing handbooks, and they learn this in their sleep pretty much. They know this very well. But when I tried to explain to them that biomass floats and trichomes settle, and we want to keep the stuff on top, and we want to keep the trichomes on the bottom, and they're like, what? So they don't have any experience on how to make a terrible agitator. I mean, we're not trying to make a Slurpee here. We're trying to, number one, extract. Number two, let the trichome settle so they get out of the way, right? And so for real, because if you look at some of the agitation devices in the field, it does look like you're creating some sort of Vitamix type of situation going on, and that tells you that something is happening, like the biomass is being ground up and your trichomes are disappearing. They're popped and they're gone, right? And so when you're making a tank, there are relationships, right? The diameter of the agitator, the position of the agitator from the bottom, the diameter of the tank, and the relationship between the tank and the agitator, how fast the agitator goes. And there's a million and one designs for the agitator, but you can go about it two ways. So, like, there's a Canadian company. They have a really good agitator and they have a really nice tank, but they have a round tank and they have baffles. And so what a baffle does is basically something that eliminates a vortex. So I'm gonna dumb this down as much as I can,
Yeah,
because you
please.
when you have a vortex, like a whirlpool type of situation, that's just lost energy. You're basically losing energy to the process. I mean, again, I'm oversimplifying things, but you're losing energy in the process. And what happens is that I see that you have these agitators going extremely fast because the agitator's at the bottom of the tank, but the biomass is at the top. So the agitator needs to go really fast to be able to reach what's up at the top, which is called the interface.
Oh,
So then what happens is because the agitator spins so fast, it'll create this vortex. And so in industrial mixing, to prevent a vortex, you use baffles, which are just paddles on the side of the tank that instead of having one big swirl, one big whirlpool, it breaks that up and either prevents it from happening if you're doing it right, or at least, mitigates that process. And so that's one of the things we did was that. But I really couldn't figure out how to put a bag. I always wanted to have a bag inside the tank, because there's so much that goes into play into this process, and I think one of the most important ones is the actual cleaning aspect of it. So I was really adamant about bags, and when you add a baffle, there's more manufacturing, it's more complex, and the other natural progression when you start with a baffle is to simply change the geometric shape of the tank. So as we started with a round tank, you'll see somebody like the Delta VTS that Frenchie worked on. So they came up to that same realization. What did they do? They added two baffles. They have a round tank with two baffles, but the baffles are incorporated into the tank. And so it's a D shape. So that's how they went around it, right? Um, Most of the homemade, not homemade, but home washing machines, right? The little ice, what are they called? The little clothing machines that we use to make action, right? The small ones. A
I
lot
don't
of
know.
them are square.
My buddy had some like a hand crank
Bubble
washer that
magic.
he bought from China. I don't know what they're
Yeah,
called,
like
but
the bubble magic is what I'm talking about.
I've seen some of the evolution of these devices.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so again, that is the next natural progression, right? I mean, in industrial mixing and even home appliances, you'll see these geometric shapes. So you'll see a square a tank with an agitator because they've run into these same problems, right? None of this is rocket science. Engineers have gone through this over and over and over, and everybody comes to similar conclusions, right? You can go about it either this way or that way. Like I said, the BTS went with that D shape because they added two baffles. The guys in Canada, they just added baffles to their stuff. We ended up finally in a square shape. We did a lot of computer simulations for it, and the square shape, all it does, it adds a baffle to reduce or eliminate that vortex. And then from there, you go down this weed of agitator design, where you place the agitator in relationship to the interface, how wide the agitator is, the actual blade configuration you have. And it really is a lot of just trial and error, to get the highest yield, the highest quality, and so on and so forth. For us, we're a very small company, so I'm of the mentality of just get something out there, break things, and then just make the very next machine a V2.1, a V2.2, and just from every single machine you make, you learn something, and it is a continuous improving process. I'm a big fan of like Tesla and Elon and things like that, and look at some of the podcasts that Monroe does, and he talks about just how the iteration process of the cars is so fast. Like they think of something today, and within a month, and we're talking about a big production company, right? How they can incorporate these changes into their products so quickly. And I mean, I like the idea, and that's what we try to do, as to where I don't have like a production run of 1,000 machines, and then I won't change anything until those 1,000 machines are sold. It's like we go one at a time as we're manufacturing, and we learn something from customers. The next that come off the line, they're incorporating. So everything is a continuous, evolving process, just to make the machines better and better and better. And I surround myself with just extremely smart people that want to pitch in, be it like with Justin with the bubble hash machine and the pumps, and then with other people now with the electrostatic. So that's how we do it. It's sustainable. It works really well. We get the feedback from the community so we can grow as a company. And at the end of the day, just have products that are just awesome. They're just awesome. They work.
Charles MacGowan, Sambo Creek Filtration. Yeah, well said there, Charles. And always having the feedback of the community seems to help a lot. For what I've been doing, you know, uh, and some of it's not always positive, but that's good too. I don't mind. I like to get the good mix of it, and the fact that people are saying anything at all to me seems like, uh, yeah, you're making an impact. People are using your gear, they're testing it out. Could I ask you how many states you got your gear in, or how widely is your product being distributed at this point?
So we've been selling equipment now for closer to a decade. And safe to say I have equipment in every single state. But moreover, a good portion of the world by now. Yeah.
Cool. So you're selling internationally as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Right now, as Europe grows, the like the solventless products, we're they're at a scale where they can now use our machines, because that's my biggest setback, my weakness. I don't make small products for the home grower, unfortunately. We're not set up for that. We're not a mass manufacturer that makes, you know, thousands of products, so we cater to larger operations, not necessarily ginormous MSOs type of that stuff, but in general, our machinery comes into play when a lab reaches a certain. Right now, as Europe is starting to grow, they're starting to get to a point now where our stuff is actually of interest to them, which it's always been a bummer because my stuff's made in Italy, and there's nobody in Italy that's going to buy my stuff because I guess it's not so legal there yet, or and so the producers aren't big, right? In Europe in general, there's a few places, but not so much, right? So it's not like the States where there's a lot of big companies and there's plenty of market here. So it's really cool that it almost feels like an American company coming to Europe, but the reality is that they're already made there. So that's super cool that we're going back, I guess. So that's pretty awesome. I like that.
Yeah, and I'd love to, if you would keep me posted on the situation over in Europe. I got a couple contacts over there, but I'd really love to stay on top of that, Charles. Um,
Yeah, we're really proud we're getting into one of the largest operations in Holland. That's super dope. Like those guys there,
awesome.
super intelligent. The operation is super cool. So it'll be really nice to see our equipment over there. And I'm very excited right now. I think we're going to be huge in Morocco and Spain. It just seems like now I have 1,001 friends in Morocco. I just think that I didn't understand that Morocco was such a significant market, but this whole static thing, the static thing blows my mind. This is my prediction. So the static thing, everybody in Europe just smokes, just I'll call it the traditional Moroccan hash, right? I mean, they're used to a certain type of product over there, which really isn't that popular here. And so we're kind of like exporting our, consumer preferences to Europe.
Mm.
And maybe you might say that they're not up to date with their tech and their product offerings as we are, but they have their traditional stuff that they just love it. And I, for one, you know, I've been to Spain and these little egg type things, got lots of stories on where those things come from. But that hash, um,
Yeah.
it's awesome. Like I don't know, man. Like it's super cool. And so my prediction is that this traditional method of making things, where the consumer in the United States might not be so hot about, I think the static tech is going to change that, where we're going to go back to our roots, which is what they got going on. You know what I mean? So I think they might actually skip a few steps and just go from start to finish, if you will. I don't know. I think that'd be super cool because when you some of the guys that I work with, big shout out to Wolverine Dabs, and there's a ton of people right now that are supporting me in this solvent this static project. You'll see a few names coming up soon, but their stuff just looks so fire, and it's nothing but heads. It's just amazing. So when you really start to look at some of the stuff, what they can do with it without anything more than static electricity and a lot of work, it's just amazing. So it's just like taking that old school tech and just making it 99% just pristine, pure. So that's just gonna pop. And from there, they can do whatever. Like the Payatella is hot right now, right? But what is that? That's just really good hash. I mean, like, just no, you know.
And it is interesting to see the evolution of the concentrate market, because I've seen everything from, like pressed keef to the dry sift to the bubble hash to now we're doing all these rosins and different. I didn't even know that shit existed 3 or 4 years ago. So watching the evolution of the concentrate market certainly to me has been fascinating.
And I know that there's gonna be an ongoing evolution with the new tech that's coming out. People are gonna make some really cool products. I don't know. I totally see that Payatella and similar types of products are going to be super popular here, and of course, we're going to export some of the solventless and solvent-based extraction methods to Europe. But it'll be fun to really see what people come up with.
Hmm. It sure will be. And Charles, look, I'm going to do another shameless slap here. Sambo Creek Filtration, Charles MacGowan. I'm running out of shit here, Charles. I want to thank you for being here. Hang on. I want to pull myself up. Hey, thanks for being here. I'm glad the audio worked out this time. And for everyone who might have seen this, we had some, well, I had some audio issues last time, but Charles MacGowan, Sambo Creek Filtration. Thanks again. If you have any final notes, and I want to just, before we get out of here, I do want to maybe share your website one more time. Sambo Creek, Creeck, .com. Go there. You can check out all their gear. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you again. So I always leave the last word for my guests. I want to thank my sponsors again too. Higher Elevation here in Morrisville, Damien and Bailey. That banner's down there at the bottom. But yeah, thanks, Charles. And I will send you this video after we're done. But the last word is for you. And so take it away if you got anything else, my friend.
Yeah, no, appreciate you having me. A great conversation. Always fun to talk to you. Yeah, stay tuned, everyone. I think that the plasma static is going to be epic. I think there's great things that are going to come out. Some of the creators that we're working with, they just have some really fire stuff that are going to make a dent in consumers' preferences and just really cranking out some really high purity stuff for the masses. So hopefully we've done something good here. You know, we're always looking out for the little guys, you know, trying to promote craft cannabis. We're trying to promote the little guys and giving them the tools to succeed in this incredibly different market. And, you know, we hope to do good um, to people, the farmers, and especially the farmers in places like Tirah, Pakistan, planning a trip out there, try to go see those guys and bringing them some free tech so they can up their game and make a little bit more money for their products. Such a hard way of life, you know, they really hustle. And so very important parts of the world that have land race genetics that, you know, we want to preserve. And so hope that this sort of process allows those people to be viable long term so they can make a sustainable living, you know, without breaking their back so much. And so really appreciate all those guys for what they do, and everybody that's helped me to make this happen, man. Stay tuned, guys. It's going to be epic.
Charles MacGowan, Sambo Creek Filtration. That's not showing up very good on my background, but
Yeah, you're all good.
yeah, but
I'll
please
see.
check them out. Sambo Creek, CREECK.com. Charles, thanks so much for joining me today. I wish you the best of luck in your endeavors, and I'm going to sign it off here. The
Cheers.
devil's in the
Thanks for tuning
details.
in.
Yeah, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fun.